Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to be going over our Week 2 core plays for the Sunday main slate. Lots of stuff going on, lots of movement, but we really have to talk about some of these situations and injuries that are coming up. CMC being the main one, the most expensive running back, kind of a guy that is very polarizing, and his backup played in the Monday night game against the Jets and basically took over his exact workload. We've seen that in the past with Raheem Mostert doing that in San Francisco and Elijah Mitchell, but to see Jordan Mason do that this week was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he was a surprise, or CMC rather was a surprise inactive. We thought we were debating on whether or not we were going to include him in the lines, and you actually were like, "Yeah, I think it's going to be a low scoring slate, but you just got to plug him in and figure it out." And lo and behold, he sat out, and Jordan Mason was an automatic free square. The problem was, everything was so chalky that there was no spin ups that we weren't already getting to regardless. Yeah. And obviously it didn't play out in the Jets' favor like it started off. But yeah, that's enough about the Monday night slate. Essentially, it's a brand new week. Had a very rough debut on the main slate on our end. That was one of the worst, season opener Sundays that I've had in a long, long time. And we killed the Thursday night slate. Hopefully we can have a little bit more balance this week and have some consistency because it pretty much just went all downhill after Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at this last weekend, there were a few games that we were expecting to go differently than they did. So we're gonna bounce back. We always do. I mean, this is football. It's not ever gonna always work out. It's still betting. But this week we're hoping to come out on top of it. So
yeah, and then always just kind of keep in mind, full disclaimer, like you're not gonna hit every week. We're not gonna bat 1,000.
Right.
And don't just say, "Hey, we lost last week, so we're not gonna play this week," because those are the exact moments that happen when it hits big.
Yes.
And you just miss out on it. Because always just kind of manage your bankroll, play what you can afford to lose, but those that play all the time, it's going to pay off over time because my least confident lines can do better than my most confident lines all the time. So don't feel discouraged. Don't feel fretted. We're up and at 'em, and we're feeling optimistic that we can bounce back this week.
Absolutely. And that's because I'm going to turn the screen share on, but it's also because, you look at the slate and there's some really good opportunities. There's some games that we think, we want to get to, of course, starting off, looking at the quarterback position. First guys on the list, last week's game on Thursday night, season opener, you get both of them as the most expensive players on this list. Lamar Jackson, he can always break open any slate, any day of the week. He had 29.1 fantasy points last week, and truly he left so many points on the table. So that is crazy to say that his floor is even close to that.
And that 29.1 was with just one overall touchdown. He hit that 100-yard rushing bonus. Obviously, the game script made them play from behind. This week, you expect a huge bounce back. They're the biggest favorite on the slate. And, I just expect Baltimore to just kind of roll. But Lamar, in this case, he's going to have to be involved in essentially the way to roll it. Because if this ends up being a Derrick Henry game, it could be, that's going to be a hefty penny for somebody that could possibly just score under 18,
right?
Depending on, because I don't expect him to hit that 100-yard bonus again. They should be playing from ahead. And, he could be involved on a lot of scoring opportunities. It's just whether or not he and Derrick Henry can coexist.
Right. The biggest problem for them was their O-line. And it's not the rushing upside with their O-line. It's the pass blocking. Roger Rosengarten, we talked about him all summer because
one of the funniest moments.
It was amazing.
So Roger Rosengarten, full disclosure, rookie right tackle that Mel Kiper was propping up into the first round, and we were kind of teasing that all throughout the draft process.
Oh, yeah.
And he fell to the same team he predicted in the second round, late in the second round, and he did not start, but he came in his first play.
Chris Jones,
that was the strip sack against Lamar.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was a sight to see for sure. But yeah, it's an interesting way to go if you want to go with the Baltimore side of things. He's the only quarterback above 7,000.
Yeah.
This week. So really, the quarterbacks, there's a lot of good ones and good matchups. All of them are just kind of right within 1,000 of each other. But he's the one outlier. But obviously, he might have the highest ceiling on the slate. And matchup wise, it's no different.
Of course. And then the next guy, we will talk about Patrick Mahomes. We always have to. In a game against Cincinnati, I would expect to bounce back. And they always play these games close. Why not play some Patrick Mahomes? He has designated pass catchers that you can get to. So you shouldn't have a problem figuring out who his pass catchers are. Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce will bounce back. You will have big Travis Kelce games. Hollywood Brown might be back, but if he's not, Xavier Worthy's another option, of course. You need a little bit more targets and like ball touches for Xavier Worthy to pay off, I think, in a slate this big, though.
Right. I'm so excited to watch this game.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
we're getting back-to-back luxuries of a Baltimore season opener that couldn't have gone better from an aesthetic perspective. It broke records of viewership and all that good stuff. But this week, Cincinnati and Kansas City have actually been the rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been Baltimore and Kansas City, or even Baltimore and Cincinnati, who are within division of each other. Like, this one has felt like the best rivalry over the last couple of years. Joe Burrow's gotten the best of Patrick Mahomes multiple times, and Patrick Mahomes in the most recent matchup in 2022 AFC Championship game, obviously they came out on top with a game-winning field goal. They always play each other well. One thing I've always learned is when good teams lose or get upset or have bad games against bad teams, bet them the following week.
Right.
That doesn't mean to win, but just bet them to, from a pride perspective, just really show up. And when you're going against Kansas City and got to go on the road to avoid an 0-2 start, I expect Cincinnati to be much more, inept to make this a competitive game. And that really kind of bodes well with Patrick Mahomes, who, he didn't have a bad game. He just was only involved on one touchdown. It was just one of those things where not much was needed from him. He didn't pan out from a fantasy perspective. I don't know what the ownership will be on him this week, but it's very interesting because this is definitely going to be a game that we're going to be targeting.
Absolutely. So the next guy, a guy we've been actually putting down all year through this offseason and stuff, but Anthony Richardson comes out, and you know what? He left so many points on the table. Yeah. And that was something we talked about a little bit before this, because last week during our Sunday live stream, someone asked us who they thought between, I think it was like Chase Brown, A.D. Mitchell, and someone else. And we picked A.D. Mitchell as the person they should put in their flex. A.D. Mitchell had 2 touchdowns overthrown. He ran a 4.34. You overthrew him twice. And then a 50-yard pass on the sideline. Anthony Richardson still missed a lot of plays. He only had 9 passes, and 2 of them were bombs to Alec Pierce, who had 125 yards in this game. 47% completion rate. That's not good, guys. But at the same time, he has the upside because of his rushing, 6 for 56 and a touchdown. That gives him the upside. He's playing Green Bay. They have lost their quarterback, and their defense, I mean, they looked okay, but they couldn't stop the run. And if you're going to take a chance on either Anthony Richardson or JT, I'm not against it.
Yeah, with Philly and Green Bay, we talked about how it couldn't have been a better game on the Thursday night game.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it couldn't have been a worse start to a game when it was the Brazil game on Friday night between the Eagles and the Packers. And then it started to get going, and it was good, and then it ended with a thud because Jordan Love is now going to miss some time.
Right.
And so now, going forward to this game, Indianapolis is now favored on the road by 3 points. It's risen by a whole 2.5 points this week. And now, it's a very interesting spot because Green Bay really kind of struggled everywhere last week, especially on the ground. They allowed 3 touchdowns to Saquon Barkley in his Philly debut, and he was one of the guys on the slate that we were unsure about because we didn't know about the usage, touch push, all that good stuff, and he just really was like, I'm finally in a good spot to just produce.
Yes.
And they meant it. One of our favorite props of the week, and we'll talk about running backs in a little bit, but Jonathan Taylor was a demon for a anytime touchdown. And it just felt like you don't really see that every day, especially from him.
Right.
A much better matchup. But Anthony Richardson is the same way. I mean, he's got the same rushing threat. Jalen Hurts had 3 turnovers, and and he also didn't score his rushing touchdown. That's why he didn't hit the ceiling that we usually expect from him. Yeah. But Richardson should have the same kind of very high floor this week. We'll see if he can break that 30 points and not continuously overthrow his receivers. But he had 27.1 points on 9 completions, 6 carries. I mean, that's very, very good from a per completion / carry basis. He's definitely a guy that you can fit in some lines.
15 opportunities for 27.1 points. It's really good. Obviously, we're still skeptics on his ability as a quarterback in the NFL, but hey, he almost went in and beat Houston last week. So it's a possibility that he's good. We'll see still. We're still not sure, but some other guys we want to talk about. Kyler Murray, we're going to run it back. He is in the second highest total game at 49.5 with the Rams. We will also be talking about Matthew Stafford, but truly, looking at Kyler, you got Marvin Harrison. We talked about this we did this last week. Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, now Greg Dortch, and Michael Wilson.
Right.
So lots of options. They did really lean on James Conner, though, in the last game.
Yeah, I mean, that game we heavily targeted on both sides. We were really high on that game. We thought it was going to be a high-scoring game. It ended up being 34-28. If you told me that was going to be the score, I would expect just fireworks back and forth.
Right.
Well, Josh Allen finished the game, or was at the 2-minute warning in the first half, had 2 pass attempts. Kyler Murray had a great start and then threw for about 50 yards the entire second half. And all of it was to not Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
Obviously, he had a very lackluster 1 catch for 4 yards debut, and then Kyler missed him wide open for a potential go-ahead touchdown with less than 3 minutes left, I think, at that point. But this game should be fireworks. This matchup, specifically the Rams versus the Cardinals, was a game that we were heavily targeting in best ball in terms of some correlation for week 17, because we just expect both defenses to be very subpar or bad this year. And obviously Arizona's was awful last week, and it doesn't feel like it because Josh Allen, had to hit the 2 rushing touchdowns just to kind of hit value or what we needed from him. He was actually in the optimal line stack list, which if I read back that line to you that won $1 million and
it was terrible.
Projected that to you guys.
It was not a good one.
You guys would unsubscribe so fast because he was like, oh yeah, Alec Pierce, Rashid Shaheed with Jawan Johnson, no stack with this game. Oops. And no correlation whatsoever, and it all worked out in his favor.
Right.
And that
won't happen.
He won $1 million under 200 fantasy points with the line. That never happens. It was such a weird week, and we were definitely on the downside of it because of all the guys that we targeted that didn't pan out.
Right, for sure. Gonna run through a couple quarterbacks real quick. Jared Goff and Joe Burrow are definitely in the player pool. Jared Goff against Tampa Bay in the highest hit total. Has obvious pass catchers in Amon-Ra St. Brown, who actually disappointed, and Sam Laporta, and then also Jameson Williams, who has come on. Joe Burrow in the next game against Kansas City also has really good pass catchers. Should be a high-scoring game. We expect it to go possibly even over the 47.5 with Jamar Chase, even Andre Yoshivas, and I'm so sorry. Why am I blanking? Oh, T. Higgins is out. That's why I'm blanking. Trenton Irvin played most of the game, I believe.
Trenton Irvin and Charlie Jones was there. Jermaine Burton, obviously, even without T. Higgins in the fold, did not get many snaps. I think he had less than
4
10.
snaps.
Yeah, he definitely had less than 10. So.
And then, I was going to say Yoshivas actually had 100% snap count out of the slot. So he is the slot receiver. So we know that for a fact. But the next guy that I want to talk about is Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, he did not help his receivers out at all. So he was another guy where we talked about Josh Allen. Didn't have any receivers that he brought along. Jaden Daniels didn't bring his receivers along either. And he still had 28.2 fantasy points because he had 2 rushing touchdowns, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the upside and why M was so excited about him in best ball and wanted to target him as a QB2. He was a late bloomer for us, because he convinced me, we ended up putting him at the very end over Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence and all these people that we were very high on this year. And obviously that looks like a great call so far. Thing is, now he's at a price where you really want to try to find some correlation, because it's not every day where you can just submit a bunch of lines that just don't have stacks, because more often than not, they actually do pan out. Like Anthony Richardson got to 27.1 on 9 completions, but that was because Alec Pierce had monster game. Obviously less than 1% owned. People thought it was going to be Michael Pittman, but somebody went off. With Jaden Daniels, this game, he didn't really have anybody that he peppered, but he hit it with the 2 rushing touchdown upside. Giants just going to be one of the worst teams this year. They made Sam Darnold look like we always thought he possibly could have gotten to, with the Jets and then Carolina, and obviously has been in the bust territory.
Mm-hmm.
He just looked one of the best quarterbacks of the entire weekend, not from a fantasy perspective, but just from an eye test perspective. And then it was just so out of hand late in the game where they really just didn't target anybody to the end. He only finished with 24 pass attempts. Jaden Daniels, on the other hand, this is going to be a close game. I feel the Giants have actually had the upper hand in this Washington
Right.
rivalry over the last 2 years. I think they've won 4 straight. And, I expect both of these teams to be fighting tooth and nail as a rivalry. They always do. And to avoid 0-2, it's going to be a weird game. It's one of the contrarian games I actually picked out because there's not really too many expensive options. And I see potential value from both sides of this game.
For sure. No, I really like Jaden Daniels, and I just wish we could figure out what receiver he's going to bring along. We expected Terry McLaurin. He went for two receptions for 17 yards. He was actually not even the top scorer for them. Luke McCaffrey had more. Even Zach Ertz caught a ball.
And Austin Eckler, when it was out of hand, got 4 straight targets to end the game, and so he actually hit somewhat of a reasonable day.
Yeah.
For himself as an RB2. And then Brian Robinson Jr. actually, 3.
But he was very good. So. Yeah. But yeah, so going on to the next, I want to talk about Matthew Stafford in this Arizona game. We are going to be targeting this Arizona game that we talked about, and we know where the ball is going in Arizona. I mean, in LA,
yeah,
they are throwing it 21 times.
They are completely with the replacement line right now. I haven't seen the line in this much of a shamble.
Right.
This early, like they lost their left tackle, their left guard.
It's crazy.
Their right guard, their right tackle was already out.
Yes.
And their backup left tackle got hurt as well.
Their O-line.
Tight end is gone.
Right.
Puka Nacua also on IR.
Their O-line is actually good.
Yeah.
When they're healthy.
It is.
When they're healthy. But right now, I don't know what to tell
Fortunately, this week, Arizona has one of the worst pass rush in the entire NFL. And it's going to be a bottom 5 defense all year. We're going to be targeting them all season long. Even in one of Josh Allen's most subpar games, he still, hit over 30 points.
Yes.
With how he played, and I expect no other. Matthew Stafford had an incredible game. He was one of, I believe, 2 quarterbacks to go over 300 yards the entire weekend.
Yes.
Of all 32 quarterbacks, he was one of 2. And obviously, his game was pretty much unblemished with all he had to deal with. The one mistake was the end zone interception right before the half. That was really, really crucial, especially considering it went to overtime and then he didn't get to touch the ball.
Right.
Because they just ran it right down the field and broke my heart in my fantasy matchup.
Tough. Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. Obviously, Puka is rolled out. There's a ton of value to stack him with. Kyron Williams, I remember spending time with Emory last November, and one of our favorite plays of the week was Kyron Williams, and he went for 3 touchdowns and 200 all-purpose yards. Hell of a game. He's under 7,000 this week, and he had 90% of the snap share. Blake Corum, who we told you to avoid all off season long, didn't have he had a goose egg. And that was one of the few that, avoids that actually made us happy because we had to try to find the best.
Well, it's still week 1. We have a lot. Yeah, we have a lot of room.
We're not dead in the water in any regard, but yeah. So like I said, solid value. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is going to be one of the most popular players on the entire slate. They didn't put him over 8,000. I thought it was crazy.
He'll be in my lines.
Yeah, he'll be heavily targeted for us.
Yes.
But then even if you want to find a way to double that, Colby Parkinson, 3,100, one of the best values on the entire slate from any position perspective because you know where the ball is going to go. And he had an incredible game. Let me pull up his numbers real quick. 4 for 47 on 5 targets. Very reasonable for what it is. And then with now Puka Nacua out, I mean, it's just going to be between him and Demarcus Robinson and even Tyler Johnson, the former Buck, out of nowhere, came for 5 for 79. So Matthew Stafford loves to pass it around. I expect them to be passing it a lot more because of the inability to run.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear a damn word about Kyron Williams. Oh, he had all the touches, but he was inefficient. No shit. Anybody would have been. But yeah.
They're playing Detroit. And they have no line.
Detroit was number 1 against running backs last year, in addition to
everybody being hurt. Yeah.
Everything was stacked against him, and he still, hit what his projection was. But a lot of ways to go in this game. Stafford is definitely in the player pool for sure.
Absolutely. And Cooper Kupp will be very highly owned on our stuff. The next guy, let's talk about Baker because we kind of have to because he gave us no choice.
Touchdown maker, man. He only guy that had over 3 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns.
Highest fantasy points.
Yeah, just 29.7, just missed on that 300-yard threshold, but they got too far ahead essentially for himself. He looked fantastic. Probably the best quarterback from a performance perspective this weekend. It was just incredible how he followed up his breakout
Mm-hmm.
or return to the to relevance,
Right.
and in a make or break year for him. Got extended in the offseason. Mike Evans surprisingly came back, and both he and Chris Godwin 8-8-8. Rashad White was the PPR inefficient back he always has been, but 6 for 75. Jalen McMillan, somebody that we liked as a sleeper, only caught one pass, but it was the 30-yard touchdown.
Right.
So he did well as well. Kate Otten is really kind of the only surprise because he only was targeted twice. We've always liked him as a player, but it feels like
Tampa Bay
you can get
doesn't
him a little bit
really
more.
like him very much.
Exactly.
I don't know what
so,
it is.
But regardless, there's a ton of options to go. Detroit actually, like I said, was one of 2 teams to give up over 300 yards passing. Obviously, a lot of that was trailing, but Tampa Bay should be in the same very similar environment where they're down a score or 2 and they're trying to play catch up. And it definitely won't be through the run game. Obviously, they stifled what the Rams attempted to do. And Rashad White has been on a team that back-to-back years were the least efficient running game in the entire NFL for 2 straight years. And last week, again, averaged 2.1 yards a carry on 15 carries. They're not going to be running the ball. It's going to be through the air. And I expect Baker to have a high volume affair on Sunday.
Absolutely. And then let's get to the puke. Let's get to the bottom of the barrel. All right.
Do not judge. You're just pointing out what this is.
Yeah, we've given y'all 10 quarterbacks. So
Yes.
hopefully we don't have to play these guys.
Yeah, honestly, don't even want to. But we just got to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel. First off, Justin Fields, 5,400. He played very well. Statistically, you're not going to see that. 11.9 is not what we're accustomed to, but they basically had 6 scoring drives. They just scored field goals on all of them.
Only field goals, yeah.
They're the favorites against Denver. Denver struggled. They allowed a 35-yard rushing touchdown to Geno Smith, of all people.
Yes, that was crazy.
Yeah, so I expect Denver to be, kind of a little bit porous. I expect it to be a lower scoring game, but Justin Fields has to be in the player pool. George Pickens had a great game. He didn't go up that much in price.
$100.
He does have a tough matchup. But there's not really many places to go. He's one of the few guys that you can be like, all right, I'm going to just no stack him, but I need to save some somewhere. He's worth mentioning, especially now that they're kind of prepping for him to be the starter in week 2.
I did want to say Van Jefferson actually was on the field for more plays than George Pickens, which doesn't really mean anything with the passing volume, but players being on the field is always important when you think about just opportunities. Van Jefferson is the number 2 receiver in that offense, and he was on the field 72% of the time. So that gives you somewhat of an idea of maybe you could put him in there. Maybe he catches 3 balls and scores a touchdown and you're happy. He is 3,400. I'm not really getting there, but I'm just pointing it out that it's a possibility.
And then Pat Freiermuth as well. Obviously, he had a rough, but he got extended the Saturday right before the game, 4 for 48. We were concerned about his usage. He didn't have a great game, but you don't spend a 4-year extension on somebody if you're not going to involve them heavily.
Right.
And he was tied in 7 just 2 seasons ago. He was banged up last year. So he could be in a rebound spot on some certain weeks, and he's pretty reasonable this week.
Yep.
But yeah, this is the puke guy.
The next one, yeah.
Sir Daniel Jones, who right now is the worst starter in the NFL. He has thrown more pick sixes than touchdowns since he had his extension. Pretty Matt Schaub-esque in terms of his fall off. Obviously, he's never really proven to be, a long-term answer as a quarterback in our eyes, but he's been fantasy relevant for multiple occasions and a huge stretch of time. And then 2 seasons ago, obviously upset the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs, won a playoff game. You got to give credit where credit's due. May not like him, but he accomplished that.
They were mad at him. They were mad at him this weekend.
Yeah,
they would not let him get that.
Obviously, this week was a different story. He played terrible, just like he looked in preseason. It was not good. But again, like we said, this is a sneaky game environment. Again, I brought it up because Tommy DeVito, of all people, no longer a Giant, went for 270 and 3 touchdowns in a spot start against the Commanders last year. Were like a touchdown dog, I believe, at home.
Yes.
And they still pulled it out. It's a game that just could be very ugly, but you find a way to hit value when you're this cheap, and it doesn't feel comfortable. Probably want to avoid it, but it's worth mentioning because I'm not shocked if he goes for 20 points just because of the defense he's playing and the style of quarterback that he is. If he can kind of get some of his legs back under him.
Well, not just that. I think that he is one of the, if you are going to play a quarterback, he is one of the easiest stacking. Because Malik Neighbors at 5,900 went for 5 for 66. Wan'Dale Robinson had, I believe, 12 targets. So you have to put him in that player pool.
Slayton is
concussed. Yeah,
he's concussed. So it looks like he's trending towards being out. Theo Johnson is almost minimum price, $2,600 at tight end, and he had a decent target share last week. So very easy puke stack to afford a lot of other options if you want to target other games. Like I said, it's worth mentioning. Makes me sick thinking about it, but you just gotta play the field sometimes. And this week we're going to be kind of more spread out with a lot of the ownership that we have.
One thing I will say, because we did bring up Theo Johnson, and we're trying to get a little bit of him at the end of drafts during best ball. He played 86% of the snaps, while who we expected to play, Daniel Bellinger, played 23%. So that tells you where they're at on the tight end situation, and maybe a guy that you could pick up later on in fantasy even. Now we're going to the running backs, because we're going to talk about running backs and then we'll go into straight lineup builds. But we talked about Christian McCaffrey. I personally don't expect him to play.
I would. There's no reason to, when you saw what Jordan Mason and Debo together as a 1-2 punch, essentially, did. You're a huge favorite. You should win this game, whether you have him or not. Why risk it when it's an Achilles?
Yeah.
Don't play with fire.
It's week 2.
You just extended him to be the highest paid running back by a wide margin. Don't screw it up just because you're impatient. It's week 2. There's 16 games to go, and even if you lose this game, it is not the end of the world. And Jordan Mason, like I said, his debut as a starter, over 130 yards all purpose, scored, crazy good game. And again, he's one of the best values on the slate. Should Christian McCaffrey be ruled out, I think he's all the way down at 5,200. But yeah, it's one of the biggest storylines to monitor, because there's not nearly as much value that we're looking to try to get to this week. Last week, we were kind of heavily targeting the 5K range. Not really much of that this week, but we'll try to kind of talk through some names and kind of bring up some guys worth mentioning. Yeah,
and JT we kind of talked about earlier. He's going against Green Bay, no quarterback, gave up all kinds of yardage to Saquon last week, so play JT. We think that he's a good value at 7,700 even. Breece Hall against Tennessee. Tennessee actually didn't do bad against Chicago last week. It was all defense and special teams in that game. Scored a whole 41 points basically with defense. So you could get to him if you would like to. I guess, who is your favorite guy above 7,000?
To spend up, it's JT. Obviously, he has the best matchup. Breece Hall, it's tough because Tennessee looks. I thought that they would be a sneaky defense this year. They're even better than I thought. I mean, they allowed 100 yards or less than 100 yards to Caleb Williams, and then on the ground,
nothing,
absolutely nothing.
Yes,
and straight up, it was a punt return and a pick six, and then a bunch of field goals, and then a 2-point conversion that ended up kind of devaluing the great day that their defense had, because statistically they didn't put up a ton of turnovers and stuff like that, but they were holding their own, and the Jets looked terrible after their first couple drives. We knew that they were just going to give Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson essentially every important touch.
Right.
Obviously, Allen Lazard, who surprisingly played 100% of the snaps, we thought he would be the wide receiver 3, but he didn't have a single touch, and then just in garbage time, somehow ended up 6 for 89 and 2 touchdowns, and killed my 6-leg parlay, and I'm still sad about it to this day.
And our lines for it was not cool.
It was a rough one, but I don't know. I just don't want to force something in against a tough matchup.
Yeah,
we saw it even last week with a lot of studs that just were very inefficient against really solid defenses that we expect to be really good against the run game. And unless he pulls up a very inefficient but 7-reception game, I don't know if I can trust him hitting this value right here.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat, we actually had Devondre Sweat a much higher on our draft board when he came out this offseason at like in the 40s, where everybody else had him in the 80s to 100s. And it's because of this. He can stop the run. The 84 total yards rushing this week. Not the best in the NFL, but pretty top 10, really good. So yeah, Brees Hall is a tough one. Travis Etienne going against Cleveland. I know they didn't necessarily stop Dallas, but they still have a very good defense, and I don't know that I want to challenge them with
Yeah,
Jacksonville
he was
team.
a tough one. He was our thumbnail, and he scored early in the game, and we were kind of correlating that game. It was much lower scoring than expected. But one of the crucial ones is him running up the gut,
Oh my
getting
gosh!
punched out at the 1, and the very first play, Tyreek boom the other way, 80 yards touchdown. Which we had a little bit of him, so cool, but
And
2 touchdown day that was kind of ruined. And obviously Tank Bigsby was very efficient with his touches. We were waiting and seeing if they were just going to make this a one-man show. Last year rather, they really didn't allow him to breathe at all as any kind of significant role. It was kind of more split than I thought it would be, but maybe it was just riding hot hand a little bit of approach. But Jacksonville should be favored. They kind of let one get away last week, and I expect them to bounce back in some
right.
way, shape, or form. A little expensive to get to, but he's a very solid tournament play because I feel like a lot of people are going to be avoiding him.
So next, I want to talk about we talk about 5 box running backs. We're going to talk about two 5 box running backs and two 4 box running backs in this little range here. Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, Kyron, and Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco is a true 5 box this week. He is favored. He has passing game upside. He has 20 touch upside. He has everything you need as a running back. So he's a guy that we of course want to target. Jahmyr Gibbs, another guy that has the same upside, except for he might not get 20 touches. That's a little worrisome with him always, but he has all the passing game upside. Derrick Henry, no passing game upside, but he is playing the Raiders at home with all the bells and whistles. And then Kyron, the only reason he's not a 5 boxer is because he's not at home. So all 4 of these guys right here all have similar situations.
And shoot, I could even throw in Josh Jacobs in there because home against Indy, the most all-purpose yards to a running back given up last week, 178 yards to Joe Mixon in his first game as a Texan, and that was at home. This week they're on the road. Josh Jacobs was clearly the only guy that was going to get relevant touches. Obviously, Wilson had a couple of breakthrough runs, but it was pretty much the Josh Jacobs show. He just, after 6 carries, I think he had 8 yards.
Yeah, he started slow.
Very, very slow. Had a couple of breakaway runs to kind of get his average up a little bit. But he didn't score, didn't have a great debut, but this is going to be a grinded out kind of game, especially if Malik Willis is in the fold now. They're not going to be taking a ton of chances. This is going to be a very conservative game plan, and I expect maybe Josh Jacobs getting involved even more as a pass catcher, which will be a very interesting sight to see. He was limited in practice today, but I don't have any concerns with him missing time. 6,500 is way too cheap, in my opinion, for the possible workload that he might have.
Yep. So 5 straight guys that we are thinking about playing, and we'll talk about who our favorites are when we get to building lineups.
And also, I mean, if we just want to keep the train rolling, James Conner, first 6 plays of the game, touched the ball.
Yep.
And he was very inefficient. We've never really liked him as a running back, but he's been the guy to just get volume. He's just the alpha in that offense right now as a running back. And the Rams obviously were shredded by Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, especially later on, giving up 2 touchdowns. I believe 180 all-purpose yards between the two.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's definitely a spot to target. That's going to be a game that is, I believe, the second highest total on the slate. We're going to be getting a ton of it, like we mentioned earlier. That's a very interesting and affordable bring back for James Conner lovers.
Yep. And then something to monitor with Kenneth Walker. He might not be able to make the game. We're still waiting to see. I'd expect him to play, but if he doesn't, make sure you have a little bit of Zach Charbonnet. We are not big fans of Zach Charbonnet because when he had opportunities last year, he did not do well. But still, at the same time, he is still going to be a running back up against the New England Patriots, who had a good game last week. But we don't expect as much
them playing from the entire game.
The whole game, exactly.
Yeah, with Kenneth Walker, I'm a little bit more pessimistic that he might play because this is the second oblique injury within a year span that he's had. And also, it's worth noting Zach Charbonnet was already priced up to 58.
Mm-hmm.
So even if he is out, I don't really want to play Zach Charbonnet based on what he showed us last year in being the alpha and only guy in that offense. Really, DJ Dallas was outproducing him in the pass game. It just wasn't great. Look for him. Maybe he can bounce back, but I'm not spending 58 to find out.
Fair enough. And then looking at the next few guys, of course, Rashad White, do it all in the Detroit game, 51 point total. If you wanted to bring him as a bring back, I'm not against that in any way. Ramondre had one of his best games he's probably ever had with 24.6 fantasy points. He is an option because we know that he's going to be the only guy in town. I can actually check the snap counts right now while Cam goes ahead and talks about that grouping.
Yeah, I mean, with Ramondre, that made our RB2 shares of him feel really, really nice after starting out where he did. We're not going to expect many game scripts going his way, but if they really truly give him 30 touches in games that they're possibly ahead, that's really nice. I mean, they're at home against Seattle this week, so it's not far fetched to assume that he could possibly kind of do this again. 6,200 is pretty expensive, especially with a couple $100 more for way better matchups.
Right.
But he was worth mentioning after his great performance. Aaron Jones looked pretty solid in his debut, wasn't spectacular, but it's against San Fran, and San Fran pretty much stifled Breece Hall. So I'm gonna avoid that this week.
The only reason I was saying Rashad White is because, and he's playing Detroit, who is obviously stifled Kyron, but he catches the ball 6-7 times a game, so that makes him okay. I was going to say that Ramondre had 80% of the snaps, so
Gotcha.
that should tell you everything you need to know.
That's pretty damn good for a running back snap count share. But another guy, a couple of 5,900 guys that I wanted to talk about was Jerome Ford on the road against Jacksonville. Obviously, Jacksonville allowed a lot of receiving yards as a to Devon Achane, and Jacksonville probably a below average defense on both the run and the pass. Obviously, Jerome Ford was playing from behind last week, but he still found a way, kind of somewhat inefficiently, but got 18.9 points. Very respectable RB2 territory. I don't expect a lot of people to be on him, but he's worth mentioning. He's going to project very well. And then Tony Pollard, just above him, he actually had a lot more of a share of the workload. Obviously, the coach came right out and was like, I really want more of a 50-50 split, but also you can't always force something when a hot hand's running. And, he averaged over 5 yards a carry. It was very good. He looked explosive again. Maybe he's fully healthy now, coming off a broken leg. Kind of hampered him last year. We were pretty much off him because he never really truly had the alpha workload. Again, he's worth mentioning. And then you saw what Jordan Mason and company, obviously that's the San Francisco 49ers. It's a much different thing, but maybe the Jets front seven clearly isn't as good as maybe we even made it out to be.
Which we expected, yeah.
He's at home this week. I actually was kind of considering if the Jets were to pull off against San Francisco, picking Tennessee in an upset this week, because really it gets very easy after this, and then Jets being on a short week, going on the road, and then knowing that they're going to play basically 3 last place teams to start out possibly 4-0, maybe overlooking a team. And I thought Tennessee, based on the way they play and how they let that game go, would have been a candidate too. So it could be a game that could be a lower scoring, but closer than you think.
So the snap count split was 61% Tony Pollard and 45% Ty J. They played them together a little bit, but mostly Tony at 60%. That's where you want your starting running back. So I don't hate that play. The next guy on the list we're going to talk about is, I believe, JK. Where is he?
JK is all the way down at 54.
JK Dobbins. And it's mostly because the Chargers got one of the easiest first 2 games in football, going the Raiders and then going to Carolina. Carolina looked awful last week. I mean, that
was an awful call by us.
I mean, I can't even.
No,
I thought a team would get better.
Very, very rarely, very rarely do we just completely go all in on one defense, and we did because they were tied for the cheapest, and we expected New Orleans after a rough offseason having no offensive line. Kamara barely was there the entire camp. That they would have some growing pains throughout the game, and it would just be an ugly game.
It was not,
and it was over about 5 minutes in. They were up 14-0 very early. Chuba Hubbard basically had no workload whatsoever. But Alvin Kamara, hit over 20 points, and he was very good. Jamal Williams also scored. J.K. Dobbins, he was the one that broke out. He had a couple of long breakaway runs, finally scored. It's a good feel-good story after back-to-back significant injuries coming back, and being in a high-volume run game that obviously it's going to be a split for the time being, but he definitely looked significantly better than Gus Edwards. And Gus Edwards we were fading the entire offseason. We started to get some sprinkles of JK later on because of a handcuff situation with
Right.
Kamani. Kamani right now is a healthy scratch. We expect him to have a workload later in the season, but for now, it's the JK and Gus Edwards show, and JK just feels like the better player at this point.
Yeah, 58% of the snaps went to JK, 42 to Gus Edwards. Hassan Haskins was the third back and did not get a single snap. So I'm actually surprised on 33 snaps that JK only saw 10 touches on rushing touches. I was more surprised even in this because we've never really seen that out of him. Being in Baltimore, you don't get that. But 25.9 fantasy points and now going.
He's going to be a pretty chalky guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if his workload is going to get even higher. I think they're going to probably try to keep him under 15 touches, especially early on, to try to make sure he can sustain this workload. But, he is going to be very chalky this week, seeing what people are going against Carolina. They're the laughing stock right now. It's going to be tough to avoid him, but just keep an eye on just because of the ownership perspective.
For sure. Jordan Mason, we've talked about him a few times. You just got to point him out. 5,200 is way too cheap if he's the starter, no matter who they're playing, because they have a really good rushing O-line, and that's just how it is. It doesn't matter.
He is a must-click if CMC is out, but even if CMC is in, maybe that brings the ownership down, but I still think he can get a reasonable 10 to 12 touches and look good doing it.
It's cheap.
He might be a touchdown or bust at that point, but maybe the ownership's off enough to where he becomes a tournament play. And, it was worth a look because, like I said, it's pretty scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes down to 5,000 range. I mean, Tajay Spears, obviously, if the coach is trying to say that they're going to have more of a split, he didn't make the most of his touches last week, but it was still a reasonable amount.
Right.
And we expect, him to hover between 8 and 15 and possibly be the hot hand for a couple games throughout. Like we said, the Jets really struggled on the ground this past weekend.
I think he's better at football than Tony Pollard. So if that becomes a thing, we'll see. I mean, this is early in the year, so, we slowly build up to that type of thing. But if he is better than him, he will be on the field 55% of the time. And so I agree with you. The last guy on the list is Jordan McLaughlin. There he is. Jaleel, sorry. Yeah. Well, I don't know who Jordan is.
Jordan is the basketball player.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Hey,
no idea if they're related, but I mean, he's the guy that really kind of, once the game got out of hand last week against Seattle, he was in more often than not as the pass catcher, trailing. They're going to be at home, but playing against Pittsburgh, who actually gave up a decent amount in the receiving game to Bijan. That's kind of how he salvaged his outing because it was a pretty great defensive performance otherwise for Pittsburgh. But yeah, Jaleel, 45. He's one of the few guys below 5,000 that's even worth a look just because they're at home. I really feel like this is an upset alert kind of game.
Yeah.
Usually you don't see, over field goal dogs against, teams that are good, not great. And Pittsburgh is riding high. They had a great first game, but starting off back-to-back on the road, I think they could possibly get lackadaisical. And you can't keep on projecting teams to win if they're not going to score touchdowns. And the entire preseason, that was the story for Pittsburgh, is that they couldn't score. They couldn't move the ball. Last week, they could move the ball, but they had 6 field goals. Chris Boswell had 28 points in our fantasy league. Kickers just went crazy. But that's besides the point. I mean, it should be a close game, and he's worth a look. Like I said, very interesting tournament play. And even last week, being as cheap as he was, nobody was on him, and he was awful. 5 catches for 1 yard, 10 for 27. But he had 15 opportunities and he's 4,500. It's not always going to be looking this bad.
Right, absolutely. And he had a fumble. I remember watching that. That was
that too.
Yeah, all of it added up. But yeah, so looking at now, what we'll do is we'll go check out the defenses and see what defense we think makes the most sense. Like I said, I always go to the 3,000 or below. What did you have? Let's see. Start with the Jets. Jets up here versus Tennessee. Okay, Baltimore against the Raiders. I think that would be a really good pay up option if I was going to do it. But truly, I'm not a person that pays up that high. So going down, 3,600 San Francisco, Minnesota. Okay. Pittsburgh against Denver. Pittsburgh is interesting because TJ Watt is awesome.
Yes,
and he just really absolutely killing everybody during this last game. Indy versus the Green Bay Packers. Possibility.
If you don't believe in Malik Willis and think it'll be a turnover machine, have at it. But yeah, there's a lot of we're not going to the bottom of the barrel. It's tough this week. I mean, if you scroll all the way down, You got, the Cardinals who couldn't stop a cold at this point. They're going to be just giving up 30 points a game. Carolina, not going to make that mistake again, even if it is against a grinded out, lower paced team. The Vikings against San Fran, we made the mistake of doing the Jets on Monday night as a value without CMC, and that was over before it started. The Saints against Dallas, being on the road, just don't have faith that they'll duplicate what they did against Carolina last week. Tampa Bay in the highest total. The Raiders, again, Baltimore kind of let one slip away. I expect this one being the biggest spread for them to kind of roll. And then Cincinnati and Kansas City. Cincinnati's defense is not good. It is not good on both ends, and I don't know how Kansas City is going to be scoring points, but this is going to be a 30-27 kind of game, 30-24. It's going to hit the over, and with that being said, because of how we're expecting it to turn out, I really don't want to touch them.
So what defense would you like to plug in? I think I have a favorite, but I want to hear what you have. What do you think?
My idea was my first thought was going Tennessee because they looked really nice. They just weren't creating turnovers, and then obviously had non-offensive touchdowns that kind of brought their score down a little bit. But 2,700 against the Jets, couldn't really move the ball at all.
Right. Okay.
I think they're a reasonable way to go.
I was thinking Denver against Pittsburgh. That was the team that I was thinking because they are playing
both
a team.
Both
18
both of them are home dogs.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think one of them could turn out valuable. I don't know how either one will even have much ownership, but I mean, it's worth a look for both of them for sure.
Okay. So I'm going to plug the more expensive one in, and then if we have to go down, we go down. Starting with quarterback. What quarterback would you like to build around first?
So I'm going to do this this game. We're going to do a Kansas City double.
Beautiful.
There's two different ways to go. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, but obviously Rashee Rice, easy plug and play.
Yes.
He's 67.
There he is.
And I don't know if I want to get to Xavier Worthy. I know he had a great debut, but he had 4 touches and he had 2 touchdowns, and he's 6,100. I want to wait and see, especially if Marquise Brown is possibly going to return. If he's out, maybe I'm more inclined to play him, but I think if he is out, that's just going to make him a popular play. I was actually thinking of a possibility going the Isaiah Pacheco route because he did a lot of receiving work last week. That's kind of how he salvaged his day with his touchdown. Or in a bounce back spot, Travis Kelce, 6,200 is one of the cheaper spots we've seen him before. Very reasonable to get to, and I don't think we'll have 2 weeks in a row where every single Dom tight end just falls
oh my gosh,
that
was craziness.
Crazy.
I think I would rather go Travis Kelce and get my tight end locked up. Totally I think that's fine.
Plus, there's a lot of running backs in the same range with great opportunities as well. So yeah, we'll start with this. My bring back. And I'm not against doing a double bring back in this instance because
you expect high
I still can't forget the 11 for 266 and 3 scores for Jamar Chase against Kansas City in his rookie season. Again, I expect Cincinnati to really come out and play a very competitive game. But Andre Yoshivas, he went up 800 after a so-so game. I'm just hoping on the fact that his ownership kind of stays moderate because, he didn't do much, but he rose. But 100% snap count, you don't really see that under 4,000 very often. There's 2 guys this week, him and Alan Lazard, that both have that feat. Alan Lazard, more so, he's that price because that happened after the prices came out on Monday night.
Right, of course.
Whereas Yoshivas, obviously, he jumped up, but I still think he's too low for his potential workload.
Beautiful. I think this is a really great start. Do you want to do the double or do you want to do single stack?
Let's do the single on this one, and we'll see how we can build.
Okay.
Want to see what your thoughts are.
Well, I want to get
and what route we want to go because obviously we want to try to get some Ram or.
That's what I was gonna say. I want to get the Ram.
Just eat some chalk.
I'm gonna eat it.
21 targets.
I'm gonna love it.
Yeah, 21 targets. We know who the ball is going to. Obviously, he's the one spinned up, but he's gonna be very chalky, and we don't give a damn. We're gonna have him in a ton of lines this week and just ride it out.
I think that we will need to spin down and get a cheap wide receiver. But before that, would you want to do the wide receiver here from Arizona? You got Greg Dortch, you've got Michael
Wilson. That's what I was going to ask you with the bring back because, I don't actually mind James Conner this week.
That's what I was going to ask, actually.
64. Yeah. He's the cheapest of that, run of 6 that we had of guys in great spots. And again, he's the one-man show there. I expect him to have a very solid outing, very safe floor. And then from there, kind of gets tough in this range for especially at receiver.
What about how much does Jameson Williams cost?
Let's see.
He is 53.
53.
Which leaves us not enough, probably. 53. Which will leave us 42. Okay. See, it's okay. We're winging it, obviously, guys, as you can tell.
Right.
I mean, I'm not against going away from James Conner and making some extra
Yeah,
cash.
I mean, it's going to be easier to make it fit if we go Greg Dortch or Michael Wilson. Either way work because Michael Wilson had 90% snap share. Obviously, he caught the only touchdown Kyler threw, and that's all he had.
Yeah.
I expect a better performance, but Greg Dortch, when they were playing from behind, he was the guy that was the
Right.
go-to. I don't know if that can repeat. I bet you ownership-wise, Michael Wilson's going to be less owned, so let's just do Michael Wilson for now.
Perfect. Who would you like to start at running back next then?
So let's do some predicting and let's just assume CMC is going to be out. I want to just plug in Jordan Mason.
5,200 Jordan Mason. That gives me a lot of money to work with. 6,400 actually. Funny enough.
I wish we could get up even higher. Maybe we can try to force that somewhere. If you want to go somewhere other than Michael Wilson, we can go back to Connor. Or
how much is Dortch?
I think he's 45.
Oh, he's more expensive. Okay, that was my question more so. If
I could spell.
I don't hate going in this range, honestly. Like this range is fine. I think that
46.
I think that Rachaad White's interesting just because he has so much pass game upside. 6 for 75 last game. I think that Aaron Jones is interesting. Tony Pollard, like you stated earlier. I mean, you can't get away from Ramondre too. This whole section, I mean, from 6,900 down, it's just like there's a lot of really good plays. So
honestly, it's going to be a little bit uncorrelated, but I kind of want to get up to one of these running backs. So I'm going to spin down. Let's go with that would be a double.
What do you want to do?
Double stack with Cup, but just plug in Demarcus Robinson.
Not against it.
At 4,000, he's going to be popular. But I mean, in any kind of Stafford build, going with Cup and Demarcus Robinson or Colby Parkinson, like we said, if you don't want to go Dom tight end, is a very interesting route to go.
I thought about doing that next.
6,700, and then we go all the way up, and now we can afford, a Derrick Henry, a Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs. Do you have a favorite of the three?
Probably Derrick Henry.
Okay.
And I'm a Raiders fan, so that stinks.
It's going to be gross, but we're going to make it work. Like I said, I think it's a bounce back spot. Multi-touchdown side.
I think
it's a solid build.
Yeah.
Mostly favored toward the 3 o'clock games, which is what I prefer when I'm building lines. If I'm going to favor one side or the other, like I said last week, we had so many games that we loved in the 12 o'clock, but we had lines where there was 8 guys and then only one later. And if you weren't cashing at the point, your line was dead.
Right.
And that was us last week. So this time we're going to have some optimism because there's really only, I think, 2 guys, Derrick Henry and Jordan Mason, both
in the early games.
Right.
So
we'll get our running backs out the way and then we'll sweat the rest at 3 o'clock. So I don't mind this build right here.
All right. Well, then I guess I get to go for quarterback. Let me pick Stafford. Okay. I think that's the game that I want to attack.
Do you want to put in the same 2? Do you want to maybe go Colby?
I do want to go Colby.
You want to go Colby?
All right. I want to do the different build with 3,100 to save $3,000. Save $3,100 between him and Travis Kelce. Mm-hmm. So this is where I want to start, and then I would let you pick the bring back for that game. I think Arizona has a lot of options.
A lot of options. I'm very intrigued by possibly going with Marvin Harrison. I think there's going to be people off of him because he had 4 yards in his debut. Not many targets. Obviously, it was pretty windy, but this is going to be in a dome. It's going to be a much more offensively friendly game. Like I said, I think he'll probably be the lowest owned between him, James Conner, Greg Dortch.
Right.
Absolutely. Maybe Michael Wilson just because of price.
It's definitely
and then obviously Trey McBride 6,000 is reasonable as well. But I don't know if I want to. If I'm doing double tight end, I don't know if I want to do it with the Colby Parkinson and Dom tight end.
Fair enough. Style. I will throw the defense in there. We can go down to 2,700 this time. Maybe we'll add a little bit of room. Then what game would you like to go next?
Well, this is your captain in this line.
Well, then let's do...
obviously Cincinnati, Kansas City. We both seem intrigued by.
Let's do that game because I want to
Okay.
get some Pacheco. We haven't really talked about him. We have more money because of the fact that we went Parkinson. Marvin Harrison is cheaper than he was last week, and we didn't go with the $7,000 Patrick Mahomes. So we have a little bit more room. Who would you like to get for Cincinnati?
It's just really easy to put in Yoshivas.
Yeah, it is.
I want to have some lines this week of Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I
because
do too.
7,800, you don't see him that cheap that often, and every now and again, I remember last year where he had a couple struggling games, and then he's just like, I'll get open, trust me on
Right.
that. And then he had his 3-touchdown game against Arizona and had over 50 points, and we played him a lot that week, and it was a killer week. I have similar vibes this week. I don't know if we'll see the 200-yard game,
Right. That'd be fun,
multi-touchdown
though.
game, but I think he's due for his 100-yard game. If T. Higgins is out, that just makes me feel even better about it.
Fair enough. So it's still my build, but what game would you like to do that is not the normal game? I think that we need to get a fun
this line,
game.
are you going with the intent or prediction that Jordan Mason will be the easy click, or do you want to pretend that CMC's
We'll pretend
play?
CMC's playing.
All right. So one guy that's cheap, if you want to go cheap running back, J.K. Dobbins, we're going to have some lines with him. He's 54, very easy to get to, and it leaves you 7,900 for your last guy in. But if you want to go with a Dom running back, then we can try to see in the middle receiver range where you want to go.
I was thinking about going with JT as my pay up. I think that's super interesting. I'm not going to go find a Green Bay player.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to stay away from it. I almost had enough money to get JK. That's who I was thinking was going to be sitting there. 5,300 makes it a little bit harder. Now, we did assume that Christian McCaffrey will play. If he's not playing, guess what, guys? Just put Jordan Mason, and there you go.
Crisscross.
Yeah, then you're ahead already. If not, though, 5,300 area, it's a little bit tougher. I'm not playing Juba again. I'm going to be honest. He is not even this. I don't know what's going on.
As bad as they are, I don't think they'll be down 30-3 at halftime every game.
I hope not.
But I just need a better opportunity. It didn't feel good at all.
Fair enough.
Investing in him this week.
Yep. And so if you did want to double, we have Yoshivas. I was gonna say 7,800. You could have put in Jamar Chase here.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know who you would switch out, obviously, but just looking at kind of guys that are similarly priced.
There's some guys you can get to in a similar range. Obviously, Demarcus Robinson, we talked about. A.D. Mitchell, his stats are going to look like, oh, yeah, I don't want to play him, but he almost had 2 touchdowns and another 50-yard gain last week. And he's in a spot that could be, if we didn't go the JT route, we could have, put in some Indy there. No, it's all good.
I didn't mean to do that, but not that quickly at least. But yeah, so do you want to make one more line and then get out of here?
Let's do one very tournament-y kind of line.
Okay. Who do you want to be quarterback then? Because I think that is
so let's do the contrarian game I want to talk about. I'm not going to make us do Daniel Jones, but let's go with Jaden Daniels.
Perfect. We're 62. Okay. And then one wide receiver or no?
Let's see the prices of them.
57.
57's Terry. I feel like less people are going to be on him because of his performance.
I agree.
So I'm not against it.
Okay.
Honestly, it's probably just Terry or just unstacked.
I agree.
In my opinion.
I think we should go there, and then I want to get the bring back with Malik Neighbors.
Let's do it.
I think it's or we can later, if we want to change it up, we could go Wando.
Yeah, we can go Wando
if we want
down
to.
43 if we need some money.
Let me go put a defense in so that we have a defense. Bang. I remember when back in the day when we watched Al Smizzle, he used to just throw a defense.
Yeah, he didn't even talk about him.
$2,800. Yeah, quick out of. I was like, yeah, that's how we feel. And then they go and screw us. And then next game that you want to talk about.
So again, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Rams and Cardinals. It's hard to just get away from those games this week.
I can't tell. Okay, let's play a line without Cooper Kupp. I think that's the most contrarian thing you can do this week.
Honestly. So with that being said, let's go with the guy that went for 3 touchdowns and 200 yards against him in their last matchup. Let's go Kyron Williams at $6,800 and just say, damn the efficiency. we're going to get the touches
Yes.
and goal line work.
Tight end still open. We go Trey McBride.
I'd say let's do it. Because not many people typically would correlate a game together with a running back and tight end.
Yep.
Usually it's receiver, running back, receiver, or double running back, double receiver. But running back, tight end is fun.
These high end games are interesting for sure.
Yep.
I think we have to go Cincinnati, Kansas City, but I want to do it in a different way. Do you have? I don't want Yoshibas.
So you don't want Yoshibas in this one.
No,
Okay.
I think I want to do double wide receiver with Jamar Chase and I was gonna say Rasheed, but it might. That's a lot of money.
Be able to get to them.
Yeah,
that's gonna be.
It's a lot of money.
14,000.
Yeah.
I mean, we can try that if you want to get down to Wandale, but again, I don't know if we can get up to any.
No, I think I'd rather look at running back and get a running back that matters.
Okay.
So in this range, which running back would you like if you had a choice? One running back to rule them all.
We haven't done a Josh Jacobs on this. Put him in.
Okay. Josh, I don't want to get an indie player very badly, so I'm going to go ahead and just...
And if you do, like I said, A.D. Mitchell is probably my preference in terms of receivers. He's 4,000 and it leaves you 61 left, which you can get up to Xavier Worthy if you want to play pretend with that again. Demarcus Robinson as a double play.
I didn't think he was going to do that well this week.
Yeah, Quinn Johnston played well.
Yep. Let's go 80. Let's do it. I wasn't going to do the bring back, but why not? I think it makes sense.
He's 62. I think Amari Cooper could be in an interesting bounce back spot.
Yeah.
Obviously,
who
had the most passing yards last week. One of two guys to go over 300 yards. Obviously, most of that was to Tyreek Hill. But Jalen Waddle had a big play. Cooper had a touchdown that he dropped against Dallas.
Yep.
Obviously, he didn't return value. He's 6,200 against Jacksonville. I think it's a reasonable spot because everybody's kind of shitting on Cleveland's offense right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If we're going to go really contrarian, if we're not, I think you could just go ahead and click on Ramondre and be okay with his touches.
Either that or, Chris Godwin's in there, 6,000 reasonable.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of options, honestly. Sneaky guys that I don't think it's going to pull a ton of ownership.
Yeah, a whole range of them. Jaden Reed. If we weren't going Josh Jacobs, he did have. He's going to get so many touches.
He should be popular, and obviously when we saw CMC go down, we actually were trying to hammer a Debo rushing prop before they took it down because we thought that even though it's the Jordan Mason show, Debo was going to get a touch. I think he had 4 carries before he even had his first catch.
Yeah.
Jaden Reed is essentially Debo light, and with Malik Willis going to be playing the short game a lot. I expect them to be.
They will manufacture touches for him as much as possible.
He basically had 3 touchdowns last week.
Yeah.
If they knew how to line up 11 people on the field.
Let's go Amari to end out that one. It's very contrarian, but it's
a lot of low ownership.
Lots of correlation. Yeah. If you're going to really go contrarian, I mean, we got away from Cooper Kupp. We got away from Andrea Yoshibas.
Fade in the Cincinnati Kansas City game.
Yeah, and Detroit, Tampa Bay, which is the highest total on the slate. So this is definitely tournament. But if you have the choice, I mean, you're going to get 28 points from your quarterback on the 2 rushing touchdowns. Might be a real option. Hopefully he brings Terry along with him, and then hopefully Daniel Jones gets his crap figured out.
Right. But that is our long-winded first look for this week 2 slate. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe. Tune in to our Sunday live streams. We had a very good turnout our first week. It was great to communicate and talk with you all. Apologies if we had the wrong start sit option, but typically we're pretty good at nailing those. And again, it's hard to say, missing the A.D. Mitchell when it's just like, man, we were right. A-Rich just missed him multiple times. It was unfortunate, but it is what it is. We want to be communicating with you guys as much as possible. Any kind of questions you'll have on Sunday, we'll be answering as many as that come our way, and we'll be having a lot of fun for about 2.5, 3 hours every Sunday morning.
Right, and we're going to tell you when we're wrong. Like we're not scared of being wrong. That's part of this game. That's what we do. We have been wrong in the past, but we are right more often than we are wrong. So if you're just going to sell, like if you're going to go off of 1 week or 2 weeks, and you're going to be like, well, obviously you should go check out all the other platforms. They also have bad weeks. We watch a lot of guys that we used to watch a lot of guys in UFC that do UFC fights, and they miss every once in a while too, and they make a lot of money because they're right on most weeks, and
Right.
we're going to be right most weeks. So stick with us. We're going to get out this video. We have the Thursday Night Football video out, which is very exciting. Game between Bills and Dolphins at 49 and -1.5 to the Dolphins right now. So believe me, we're gonna get everything going and going in the right direction. So
yeah, and from a college football perspective, eat 'em up Cats.
oh yeah,
Texas State Bobcats are the game of the night on Thursday night. It's on primetime ESPN versus Arizona State at home. It's going to be packed. It's going to be fun to watch. 2-2-0 teams go at it. We had our most viral post of a short that we put out with Emery and Dusty doing a college football recap, and it's gotten over 43,000 views as of an hour ago. So who knows what it was, what it is at this point, but it's been really fun. That was on TikTok. You can follow us on all of our socials. We're posting on YouTube, X, Instagram, all the same stuff, and even kind of tidbits here and there. So Discord, very important. Get in there.
yes,
Let's collab.
absolutely.
Let's have some more wins. Have a much better weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. I want you guys to be a part of it.
Absolutely. We'll see y'all next time.